Before we start, a quick announcement. The 5th issue of the Tank Encyclopedia magazine is now out on Payhip. For only $5, you can learn more about the Lancia 1ZM, Vickers Mark 7-2, and Gorani APC in our well-illustrated magazine. Get yours now. The debut of the tank occurred during the First World War. As the tank proved its worth in the battlefield, the French military called for a series of projects to build massive tanks that could conquer the treacherous terrain that previous designs had struggled with. The FCM Char 2C was the result of these requirements. It is, by dimensions, the largest tank ever put into production, with a length of 10.27 meters, a width of 3 meters, and a height of 4.1 meters. For a time, it was also the heaviest, at 69 tons. The 2C's role was that of a massive breakthrough tank for France. It would plow through no man's land and cross the extensive trench systems of the Western Front, penetrating deep into German territory. The Char 2C arguably inspired many design choices featured on other heavy and super heavy tank designs of the interwar period, like multiple turrets and machine gun mounts, albeit fielding comparatively mediocre armor by World War II standards. No production tank would approach the 2C's weight record until the introduction of the German Tiger II in 1944. Hello, and welcome to another Tank Encyclopedia voiced article. I'm your host Wood, and today I will be covering the French Char 2C Super Heavy Tank. If you like our videos and want to support us, please consider donating to our Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be used to improve future Tank Encyclopedia content. The French, witnessing the impact of the British rhomboid tanks in 1916, envisioned an ultimate breakthrough tank for the final Entente offensive that had been planned for March 1919. This char de rupture, or breaking tank, was pioneered by two generals in the French army, General Jean-Baptiste Eugene Etienne, proponent of the Schneider CA-1 and later the small and nimble Renault FT, and General Léon Auguste Jean-Marie Mouret, backer of the heavily armed but cumbersome Saint-Chamond. Although they had been at odds with their competing tank projects, they would eventually come together to work on the FCM 1A prototype. Previous French tanks, such as the aforementioned Schneider and Saint-Chamond, struggled in rough terrain, especially when it came to crossing trenches. Both the CA-1 and Saint-Chamond had long hulls, which significantly protruded past their tracks. Unlike the British tanks, the tracks did not run all the way around the hull either. These design choices translated into a tank that could not adequately traverse a battlefield. Etienne envisioned a heavier tank that was not as limited as the CA-1 or Saint-Chamond. In February 1917, he proposed that one heavy tank should complement 3 or 4 light tanks in every unit. It was also necessary to design a tank that could make it through the terrain previous designs couldn't. The result of this request was the Forge des Gentils de Méditerranée, or FCM 1A. The 1A project was commissioned in October 1916, but delays meant trials only took place by December 1917. Despite the success of the prototype and trials, the 1A never went into production. Instead, FCM had learned from creating and testing the 1A to propose a multitude of more modern and battle-ready designs. The largest of these designs would be accepted for production, the 2C, which would be ready for production by February 1918. For a more in-depth look at the FCM 1A, see our video on the tank, link in the description. The armor protection of the 2C would have been some of the best, if not the best, on any tank in World War I. The front and sides of the hull were 45 and 22 mm thick respectively, with 13 mm of armor on the roof and 10 mm on the belly. The turret armor ranged from 35 mm at the front to 22 at the rear. With such an armor layout, the 2C would have been impenetrable to almost all sources of small arms and heavy machine gun fire, and even to World War I anti-tank rifles. Armor was riveted, not cast or welded, as was common for the era. The Char 2C had a massive crew of up to 13, although some sources state 12 was the standard. A commander, gunner, loader, driver, 4 machine gunners, a mechanic, an electrician, and an assistant were located throughout the tank. The main turret of the Char 2C was the first 3-man turret in history, containing the loader, gunner, and commander. The mechanic, electrician, and their assistant were present in the tank to service the drivetrain and electrical systems should any problems arise while in action, which would be often. Initially, the crew relayed information by old-fashioned visual and verbal communication as well as physical contact, but wireless sets were added in the mid-1920s for internal communication. It should be noted that the variations of the 2C may have had different crew complement and layout. For example, the 2C Beast lacked 3 frontal machine gun mounts. It seems as though every 2C had a few differences in their manufacture, as some tanks are pictured without having side machine gun mounts, Some lack their road wheel covers, and upper hull and exhaust systems differ from tank to tank. One of the original demands by General Etienne was that the 2C had to be able to cross a trench of at least 4 meters wide. To ensure the 2C could cross the widest of trenches, it could also be fitted with a long trench-crossing tail like the FT-17. The longest recorded trench crossing by the 2C was actually 4.5 meters. Unique stroboscopic cupolas were located atop the turrets, which provided good visibility while also offering adequate protection against small arms fire. The cupolas had many vertical slits cut into an exterior section. Rectangular ports were housed in the interior section. The exterior section would rotate at 300 RPM, giving the viewer adequate visibility and protection through use of this optical trick. The cupolas could also be opened if needed. Unlike other World War I era tanks, the 2C was compartmentalized but connected. Sections were self-contained, but crewmen could still move through them if needed. The 2C was divided into 2 fighting compartments, roughly divided by front and rear turrets. They were connected by a literal hallway that ran through the engine room. The 2C was initially powered by 2 180 to 200 horsepower Mercedes diesel engines taken from the Germans as war reparations. These were later upgraded to 250 horsepower Maybach diesel engines, also taken as reparations. The engines were located in the middle of the tank, with the power being delivered to the drive sprocket via an electric motor at the rear. Each engine worked independently, powering a single track. The engine powered an electric generator, which in turn sent power to the electric drive motor. As one would expect from this convoluted system, the engines were found to be unreliable, with breakdowns occurring on multiple occasions and the electrical system prone to failure. Some were eventually given French-built Souterrain Rallye inline 6-cylinder units. Top speed was 12 km per hour. The engines, among other large components, could be removed through the side access hatches of the tank or accessed internally by the mechanic. The 2C suspension consisted of 24 double roller wheels spread across 6 bogies held up by leaf spring style suspension. Like the 1A, and unlike the Saint-Chamond, the tracks ran across the entire length of the hull, protruding from the front and the back so as to aid in trench crossing. The standard 2C was armed with a 75mm main gun, the Canon de 75 Modèle 1897, also referred to as the APX 1897, housed in a turret at the front of the tank with 20 degrees of depression and elevation, a 2.5 times magnification scope, and a graduation of up to 2 kilometers. This was an effective and prolific gun that was used as a field cannon during both World War I and II. The APX 1897 was innovative for its time due to its quick-firing nature. It utilized a hydropneumatic reloading system in tandem with a Nordfeld eccentric screw breech, allowing a rate of fire of 15 rounds per minute. The main gun could fire high explosive, armor-piercing high explosive, and shrapnel shells, and during the interwar period, a high explosive anti-tank round was introduced for improved performance against armor. The 2C also had 4 8mm Hotchkiss Model 1914 machine guns. 3 machine guns were located in ball mounts, one in the front of the hull and one on either side of the tank in a recessed area, and one in the turret at the rear of the tank. Neither turret was fully rotatable due to the raised hull of the tank, and the 2C carried 124 shells for the main gun and 9,500 rounds for the machine guns. The 2C arrived too late to see combat in the First World War, and the initial order of 300 tanks by March 1919 was reduced to 100 and then 10. These 10 were sequentially numbered and named after ancient regions of France. They were number 1, Provence, number 2, Picardy, number 3, Alsace, number 4, Bretagne, number 5, Touraine, number 6, Anjou, number 7, Normandy, number 8, Berry, number 9, Champagne, and number 10, Poitou. In 1923, Champagne was modified to carry a 155mm howitzer in place of the original 75mm gun, though in 1939 she was reconfigured to her original state, with the howitzer and its turret being removed and placed in the Merith line in southern Tunisia. All units received minor upgrades, such as refinements to the suspension and the addition of internal wireless communication, until 1932 when newer tank projects gained the interest and resources of the French Army. A final effort to upgrade the 2C took place in 1939, with Lorraine receiving additional armor plates to her front and sides, increasing them to 90 and 65mm respectively. Although there were proposals to upgrade at least 6 of the 2Cs with extra armor, no such upgrades took place. Lorraine was renamed Normandy following the upgrade and became the command tank for the 51st Bataillon des Chars Lourds, or Heavy Tank Battalion, the unit containing all 2C tanks. By the outbreak of World War II, only 8 2Cs remained in service. Bretagne and Anjou had been decommissioned and their turrets placed on the Meurthe line in Tunisia. The 51st BCL was expected to take part in a planned offensive against Germany, fulfilling their original purpose 18 years after they entered service. However, the fall of Poland put a wrench in these plans. The 2Cs remained behind the lines during the German invasion of France, their value as propaganda pieces far outstripping their combat capabilities. In June, as the Germans advanced further into France, the surviving 2Cs began their journey south to Dijon. Without seeing any combat, the unit now began to fall apart. On the 10th, Touraine was scuttled due to mechanical issues, as was Picardy on the 13th. The survivors now moved south by rail, but on the 15th their journey ended at the Meuse-sur-Meuse station. German bombers attacked a fuel train further on the line, and with no means of moving the tanks before the arrival of German troops, the 2Cs were scuttled on their rail cars, except for Champagne, who couldn't even blow itself up properly. Champagne was captured by German soldiers and taken to Berlin as a war trophy. Here it remained until 1945, when Soviet soldiers captured the city and found it. It was supposedly taken to the USSR, but some sources say it was in East Germany as late as 1948. What became of it following the fall of Berlin is a mystery. It may have been scrapped, or it may remain in Russian possession even today. The Char 2C, had it arrived in time, would have been a formidable tank by World War I standards. It was an impressive feat of engineering for its time, and many of its innovative features would become standard in future tank designs. But by World War II, a new, more mobile style of war was prevalent, and the 2C literally could not keep up. It became a white elephant, its public image of an all-powerful supertank at odds with its mechanical temperament, and in the end their destruction became preferable to the image of France's prize tanks on display in Berlin. And that's it for this video. If you liked it, please leave a like and a subscription. You can find more information relating to the Char 2C through the full article, which is linked in the description. If you like what we are doing and want to let us continue working on these videos, please consider donating on Patreon or PayPal. All of the funds will be allocated to improving our articles and videos for you. Until next time, keep us in your sights.